Hi, it's Deja, and I'm super excited to finally launch my big news, which is that I'm going to be starting this video series called Monograph Mondays and Fiction Fridays, where I bring to you some of the best books that I have read. The best books that I've read. I'm a historian, and as a historian, I read a lot. And a lot of times I talk about what I read with my friends. And a lot of times people keep saying that they want to get involved in learning about history, but they don't know where to start. They don't know which books that they should be looking at, books that are not kind of like generating among the public. And so I wanted to bring some of the books that I've read, and also maybe possibly filling in some of the gaps that people have gotten in their history classrooms. That was shade. But so that's what Monograph Mondays and Fiction Fridays are going to be. Just me sharing my favorite books. And this is Black History Month, so all the books that I'm going to be covering are going to revolve around books that you should be reading if you want to learn about Black history. These are the major stops along your journey of learning and entering into the Black past. So yeah, I'm just going to get right into it. I hope you guys enjoy this series. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. I see a lot of people do that, so I'm going to do it. Leave it below. Go ahead. So, first stop on the list is one of the most impactful books that I have ever read in my life. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's definitely up there in terms of the scholarship that the author put in and the questions that are produced in reading it. And I'm talking about none other than The Half That Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward Baptist. Really, really revolutionary book, in my opinion. Really is seen as, I would think it's kind of like I think it's a key text for American Civil War historians, or just slavery historians in general. This was a really revolutionary book in terms of the way in which it looks at the history of slavery in the United States in its modern forms and in its historical time. You can kind of see, I have this book at home, but I'm not home, so I got the library book. You can kind of see, it's high use. Like, you can only rent this thing for like 72 hours. That's how used it is. They have like 3 copies and they're only 72-hour holds. It's crazy, but really, really awesome book. I'll kind of start off by what the book is trying to do and why I think it's important. So he begins by talking about the questions that we ask when we're talking about history, when we're talking about the history of slavery in our country. And I think that's of particular importance when we're talking about Black History Month, and specifically how slavery is taught in the classroom. What are the questions that we ask, right? And he hooks it in, and I think it's really, spoiler alert, I'm spoiling the introduction, but I think it's really important. He hooks us in by looking at the questions asked in the 1930s. Now, for those who are not, I didn't know this, for those who are not familiar with the 1930s, it's a really important time for the recording of African-American voices into the historical record in terms of slavery. You have the WPA, an organization started by FDR, that essentially goes in and starts, these are when the slave narratives originate. So you have the WPA narratives, or the slave narratives, in which people are asking African-Americans, those who were enslaved, what was slavery like? They're asking them questions before they die, because these people are at this point very old in their age. And so he looks at these questions and he kind of analyzes the questions and says, we're not asking the right ones. And I guess the question would be for you, how did you learn about slavery? What questions did you ask about slavery? The questions that they were asking people were like, what was it like to be called the N-word? Like, how fancy was the house you were living in? What was it like to get beaten? Did you like it? Did you not like it? It's just like very kind of like mundane, silly questions that really didn't highlight the structure of slavery, not only in the South, but in the United States as a whole. And so he uses that in kind of looking at how have we learned about slavery. And I know when I learned about it in a very familial way. So I learned about it in terms of the family separation, punishment, the hierarchical, y'all know what I'm saying. The structures of the household. So you have the master, the mister, the mistress, the children, then you have the enslaved. We learned about it from a very individual standpoint. Very rarely have I ever, actually, I've never been in a class where I've learned about slavery from the perspective of economics and how much money was actually generated from the industry of slavery and how integral it was to the United States. This book gives you that history that you would have, I'm assuming, shouldn't assume, but I'm going to assume most people, I feel like, have not talked about that in their history classes. This book gives you all that history. And in doing so, it really allows us to ask the right questions regarding the legacy of slavery, why we have those disproportionate statistics in terms of wealth between African Americans and white people, why the country itself is so wealthy. Where did that wealth come from? And it came from slavery. This book is literally the literary manifestation of we built this. It goes into how much money was being made, and particularly, which I think is really interesting for the educator, just how integral the slave trade was in terms of financing the aftermath of the American Revolution. He talks a lot about the way, he looks a lot about how we teach history, but more importantly, the fact that we look at slavery as being very inevitable. No, not inevitable, inefficient. That it was brutal and disgusting and traumatic and like just a horrible institution. But very rarely do we get at how efficient it was at allowing the United States to build up the wealth that it needed to become this great superpower. And how it combats the narrative that the United States and its power was inevitable. Because you can kind of get that. Like, I don't know. I feel like when I was in high school or I was in middle school or elementary, whenever I talked about the American Revolution, it all just seems so inevitable. Like, you have this country that was on this fast track to greatness, that there were not a lot of times of instability. Maybe that I'm not going to make a general statement on. I'm just saying that for myself because I feel like some people, their professors or their teachers would have kind of highlighted the areas of instability, particularly after the American Revolution. But I feel like what I didn't know was just how integral the financing, how much money, how slavery financed the aftermath of the American Revolution. The fact that they were in debt after the American Revolution, and they needed that labor to fund them. So I'm trying not to like spoil the book. I don't know if you can spoil historiographies. I don't know if people read historiographies like looking like, oh man, I can't wait to get to the next chapter. But the book really highlights that. It highlights the evolution of slavery, how it shaped and changed over time, asking the right questions, and how it ties back to reparations, while also not disrespecting the enslaved people. Because it doesn't just draw our attention solely to the economics. It looks at how the trauma and the brutality of slavery integrated with the economics and the wealth stealing that actually took place. And yeah, I think it really rewrites the historical record in terms of just how much is owed to African Americans and really challenges the notion of slavery not having a modern day impact. Very, very important book. And more importantly, and I'll kind of end off on this because the book, these are only going to be 10 minutes long. I just want you guys to learn, like, see, like, understand the book, possibly get it. Maybe you learn some things. We have some questions. We can have some discussions in the comments. But more importantly, Joy DeGruy, one of my favorite historians, she states that Black history is not solely about Black people seeing themselves, right? People say, why can't Black history be taught in schools? It's one of my favorite quotes. She says, Black history can't be taught in schools, not because Black people are learning to see themselves. It's because Black history is this destructive force. It's this earth-bending force that causes everybody to see everybody. And nothing can remain the same. And because of that, it's really difficult to integrate it into the classroom with those same norms. Like those same notions, you know, like Thomas Jefferson, and he talks a lot about Thomas Jefferson and how conflicted he was in terms of really needing slavery as a way to finance not only his own lifestyle, but to finance the aftermath of the American Revolution, while also understanding that this was the exact opposite to his words that were written down in the Declaration of Independence. This book allows everyone to see everyone, as in the way that Joy DeGruy says. And I think this is incredibly important when we're having conversations regarding how we teach Black history in the classroom. I'm here in London. I can see a lot of controversy happening in my hometown regarding how teachers are being asked to teach slavery. And to me, my argument would be that in order for us to decolonize our classrooms is not going to be in role playing or simply discussing the familial, individual, micro ways in which slavery operated, but looking at just how impactful it was. That's Black history. That is allowing all of us to see all of us. And this book does an amazing job at that. Definitely recommend it. I'm going to leave the Amazon review in the below. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. If you have like kind of reviews on how this operated, if you wanted me to talk about a little bit more, please let me know. I'm kind of like easing my way into this. And if you think it was too long, if you think it was too short, let me know. I'm going to be coming at you next week. We're going to be taking a trip outside of America by looking at Black history in its in the rest of the African diaspora. And yeah, let me know if you guys like this. And I really would love to get into some conversations in the comment section on kind of what the book thesis was. If you've read it, let me know. And yeah,